we've got a lot to cover today. I usually like to start with this slide because it can show you the real breadth of technology that we can do. I'm trying to get to as much as I can, excuse me. But again, we're happy to always set up a secondary demo if we need to do that. So I'm going to pause there and we're going to jump over to the demo. So to kind of help drive a bit of organization of how we're going to go about kind of looking at a lot of the technology here is I usually like to start with the component list of what the technology can do. So today we're going to focus primarily on our web SDK. So our web SDK is a technology that you can deploy into a web application. So anytime that you're running into a document, whether it's processing, viewing, editing, you can use Nutrient's web SDK to basically view and manipulate that document rather than building that from scratch. Why do we do web? Web is predominantly probably what we see the most interest in today. It's where the industry has moved really dramatically over the years. And so what we're seeing is, a lot of developers and product personas and people coming to our website are looking to go web first. Obviously, we have a number of other SDKs, as we mentioned kind of in the kickoff of this webinar for, Salesforce, iOS applications, Android applications, and then, specific server side SDKs for .NET, Java, Node.js. So like there's a lot here, but, web is usually a good place to start for us, and that's where we'll start today. So I'm going to jump in and we'll start going kind of component by component. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump into the chat or the Q&A and Pav is happy to help. So we'll start with our showcase. So this is a showcase application that we've built that's available on our website that is powered by our web SDK and our document engine SDK. This is a great example to show you kind of a glimpse of all the different things you can do. Again, this is an example application. This is how we've built it. There's a lot of customization options. I like running things usually in dark mode, so we're going to do that. So if we come back to if we punt back to the next tab that we want to look at, I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I'm going to bring us directly into the Showcase app. So here we go. The first component that was on the component list was our viewer. So viewing by sense means that, anytime we're going to run into a PDF, we're going to render it within your application. And this is our standard user interface or user experience that you're going to see. One of the best parts about this is it's super customizable. We branded this with Nutrient, but this is something that you could obviously customize if you wanted to, put your logo and things like that. So in terms of viewing, it's pretty standard stuff that you would find with a lot of tools in the market, being able to scroll. We've got a sidebar that can show you thumbnails of the PDF where you're easily able to navigate to other documents. Being able to zoom in and zoom out. A big thing about PDFs and its popularity a lot is because of the fidelity that PDFs can hold in terms of showing the accuracy of a document. Think like blueprints and things like that. Having those be accurate and consistent across different viewers is really, really important, especially when you're like building things like bridges and skyscrapers and things like that. So being able to zoom in at a really high degree and then have that fidelity and that sharpness is really, really important and something that, we've worked really hard on ensuring that with a lot of customers of ours. So I'm going to come back into the page. We want to give you the ability to, be able to search within a document so you can find text. Not all PDFs are only 5 pages as you see here. We want to help you be able to quickly find different text within the PDF. We also give you the ability to download the document and things like that. So kind of some standard things that you see with our viewer. We do see people coming into the kind of the mix here when coming in where, maybe their application is requiring you to download are requiring you to download the document. You're having to open it somewhere else. Maybe it's in, Chrome, maybe it's in, Adobe, but this would at least get you started where you're keeping the document inside your application without it ever leaving. And that's super helpful there. So we'll punt down a little bit more into the viewer and things like that. Kill that. And so one of the cool things about our viewer is that you can see a lot of different functionality in terms of the different document types that we can view. So we've got kind of two integrations of the web app, where you can either do this completely client side, where it's running as a WebAssembly. We're using WebAssembly as a WebAssembly web worker to help process the documents as they're coming in. So what that allows us to do is, while we usually default to PDF as a document type, we can pull in Office documents, image documents, and things like that, so that you're able to extend that ability to view different document types. In terms of viewing documents, we want to give you flexibility on how you're doing that, how you're transitioning. Every once in a while, you're going to have to be able to rotate, but we've done some pretty cool stuff with different customers. Bayern Munich, a popular soccer club in Germany, uses us as a for their monthly magazine newsletter, and so like they leverage certain things like our magazine viewing, and so that when people are opening this, they can see like a different UI and user experience and things like that. One of the cool things as well is that we've really spent a lot of time too is like understanding like that the industry has clearly evolved over the years in terms of like what can run a web app and why probably web apps have become so popular. It's because everything can run a web browser these days, and so we've optimized the UI and stuff to kind of to be interactive and adjust to what type of device you're looking at. So if you're running a browser on an iPad or an iPad Pro, we want that our UI to be adapted to that, so that you're not having to have a terrible experience when you're running through documents and things like that. So that's all our viewer. There's a lot there. I think the only thing I would probably come back to is a little bit more on the customization side of things, where like you can come in and customize quite a bit on the UI and the toolbar, where in terms of like you can disable certain things. You don't have to use our standard UI. And so we've been building and launching in increments a UI design system that allows you to do a lot there. And being a global company, we definitely like to localize our technology so that it can be used in different places. But this is a little bit more about like disabling certain functions on the toolbar so that you can really provide the experience that you want. Our goal here at Nutrient always is to be a complementary service to your overall application. So we want to fit in nicely with the experience that you're trying to do. So the more flexible the SDK is, the better. So that's viewing. We're going to jump down here to annotations, because I think that's where we see a big inflection point of where we start to talk to people, where they need to start marking up documents and things like that. And that's where I think the demo gets a little bit more interactive and you can see some cool stuff. So we have a ton of annotation types, and a lot of these come from kind of the PDF specifications on what you can do to annotate a document. So you're going to see common things like, ink annotations, where we're going to be just drawing and marking up a document just with an ink annotation. I'm just using a mouse today. And then from there, we can jump into like our annotation inspector, change the color, change the opacity of the annotation if we need to be able to see through, change the line thickness, things that you would expect when you're marking up a document, things like that. And then giving you the options to obviously manipulate that on like, what is the standard, color that you want to use. We use blue because it's a tribute back to our PS PDF kit days, and that's kind of some of our brand colors back then. So yeah, we use the blue as our standard one, but you could change it to what you want. So that's probably one of the most common annotation types we see. We also see like free form highlighting to be able to highlight things. We're really popular in like learning management systems and education. So people going through certain documents and wanting to highlight things becomes really important. And then always need to be able to undo our work in case we make mistakes. So we have an eraser there. So that's probably one of our most popular kind of annotation types. Other things we see is like, if the document has been digitally born or gone through a OCR process and the text is, both searchable and selectable, we have different ways to interact with the text there in terms of being able to highlight, strike through, more markup things in document editing. What becomes really, really cool about, I think, the Nutrient Web SDK is anything that you're seeing me do here today in terms of like using a mouse to do, you can do this programmatically with an API. So you could programmatically tell the document to search for introduction, programmatically highlight that before even seeing the document. And so this is all stuff you can do before you render the document. And then on the back end, you could also then say, hey, for any type of highlights, I want to actually extract the text underneath it and want to be able to use that. So think maybe you're going through a large textbook, you're studying, you could build an application where every time you highlight something, you pull that text and maybe put it somewhere else. And then so how that works is basically, we've got an annotation list that's built into our viewer where we can basically track what's happening, and then we can go quickly to these things as well. And so anytime you're interacting with a document, you can essentially keep keep tracking what's coming with it. And then you can get to the point where you're explicit with like API usernames, or you can install an API where you're asking for usernames and things like that. So super, super flexible. Other annotation types that you're going to see when you're working with Nutrient's Web SDK is, we've got stamps. We actually follow the same stamp template that Adobe uses. So, a big thing that we're super conscious of and that we really want is that when you're using our SDK within your application, if that document has to travel to another viewer or another thing, as long as they're following the PDF specifications, you should be able to view the document as you viewed it with Nutrient's Web SDK as well. So using the same stamp template as like someone like Adobe has its advantages. We also allow you to do custom stamps as well. You can upload your own stamp template as well. We've got a cool customer that essentially recreates traffic accidents using our stamps on a PDF, which they use cones and cars as stamps. And it's a pretty cool way to kind of like basically submit things to the insurance company on how the accident actually went down. So insurance agents at the scene will come in and then basically recreate the accident with Nutrient's Web SDK on a PDF. So some cool use cases that you never thought you would see with a PDF. Other annotation types would be node annotation. So, being able to change the icon that you're referencing, but, being able to talk on this and have that, today we're doing a webinar. You put node annotations and do that. And then additionally, like free text annotations as well, if you need to type on the application. And then the last thing that we really want to round out with the annotation demo is essentially shape annotations. So shape annotations have a number of uses. Same thing with like bounding boxes and things. I think what's cool about Nutrient is, we have found our way into a couple different like key industries. And so you'll see things like a cloud annotation, which, if you are in kind of the AEC industry or the construction and engineering industry, a cloud annotation is a specific type of annotation that means something on a blueprint. And so working with our customers like Autodesk and Procore and CMIC, these are things they request that would be really beneficial to them. So what we do here is we definitely try to help our customers provide the workflow that they need, but also provide the ability that they can come in and actually build on top of us as well. So that's one of the benefits of going with an SDK versus like an end user application is you get so much more flexibility in kind of what the end product looks like. So cool. So that was viewing and annotation. So we're 20 minutes in and we've covered 2 components. So we're going to speed up a little bit here in terms of what we're covering. Some of this stuff is going to come and kind of pairing as we see more components used with others. A subset of PDF annotations are PDF acroforms. And so what an acroform is, a PDF acroform is essentially you're bounding an annotations to a certain place on a PDF that you want to fill out and maybe track that information. So PDF forms, very often you've been to the doctor's office, you've done your taxes, like PDF forms are very common in the workplace and like everyday life. So if a PDF has a form field on it, we'll render it. We allow you to fill it out. So, if I wanted to put my personal information on here, I could do this, Rich Malloy. I am the third. We'll go and you could fill out the form very easily. I can download the form here quickly, locally, and then I can open up in another viewer. This is PDF Hume, which is used by Chrome. So we've got that there. Alternatively, what's really, really cool again about Nutrient's Web SDK is that I can again put language code instructions before the document's even looked at. So this information can be programmatically filled out from your own database. So you could route, maybe you have a database of emergency contact information that pre-fills this out, and then you're just looking at it before it does that. So that's really, really helpful. And alternatively, when you're done, you can actually map this information back to a database. So it's great to collect information. As any form support, we do check boxes, radio buttons, and things like that. And then we're kind of going to sneak into, we also support signatures. And so there's two key different type of signature types that we want to talk about today. One is an electronic signature. So what's an electronic signature? Electronic signature really is just it's called a wet ink signature, which is essentially a PDF annotation. So I can draw on this document, and then the Nutrient Web SDK is going to resize it, put it in there. And so what we're doing in this process is we're recognizing that this is a form field that's been designated as a signature box. When we click on it, we're going to pull our UI to make it really, really easy for you to sign, similar to what you're probably seeing in other tools, because they might be using Nutrient. But you can add, text signature, you could add an image signature and things like that. And so that's really beneficial for a lot of people when they're signing off on things. I think the next logical thing is like, well, what if my form's outdated? What if I need to add stuff? What if I need to add a signature box? Maybe I need 2 people to sign this. Typically with PDFs, one of the things you want with a PDF is the underlying text and formatting is static. You don't want that to change. That's why PDFs became so adopted. Is there's a level of reliability about the data and the information on a PDF. And so like, if I have this form here and, maybe I need to put more information on the date side, or, I don't want this to be a checkbox anymore. I want these to be radio buttons. Typically you would kind of have to go back from scratch and build it again. Or, if you use an SDK like that, what you can do is you can actually use us to build out the form and do this. And so like, the most streamlined way is like, if we're just going to build out a form, we can then give it what it needs to do to talk to your database and then whether it's required, and there's characteristics and properties of that form field itself, if you want to pre-fill it or map it back. I think where we see most commonly this is being used is like in an e-signature workflow, similar to like how you use DocuSign, where you're dragging and drop signature boxes, initial boxes, and things like that on a PDF, and then you need them to be signed. We see that used a lot. And so being able to change these forms and things like that is a really valuable tool. So, maybe in our science course, we added another option where it's like super advanced. And so we want to add that option to our form. And so that would give us our fourth thing there. So, and now we have super advanced. We can come out here, we can do our drop down. After I get out of this, we can open this in Chrome, we can drop down, and now we have super advanced here, where we're in another viewer looking at this. We have radio buttons here now instead of checkboxes. So we've been able to manipulate that form field using Nutrient's Web SDK, which is pretty cool. Save you a lot of time. And then kind of jumping back to the signature conversation, you saw us basically put an electronic signature on a PDF. Again, here we go, electronic signature. We dash on it real easy. We also have more of an annotation type where you can then drop it and then drag it to where you need it to be. So that's a good use of it. What we're seeing, especially, and then the pandemic kind of escalated this, and a lot of local legislation around the world about, the use of digital certificates with signing. And so what a digital certificate really does is it is basically certifying a couple things happen with the document when you sign it. One, the person who signs it is the person who says it is, because you're using certain credentials to log in. Maybe you have an actual physical digital certificate, maybe you're putting a USB stick in, but there's basically a process where you're basically making sure the person signing is who they are. And then from there, once the document's been signed, so we're going to do this real quick. We're going to sign on our signature fields. We're going to pick here. We're going to find it. John Doe will be that. And we're going to sign the document real quick. So we signed, we're going to add our digital signature. And so what Nutrient SDK has done is we've added a watermark that you can customize. We've signed it. We've had a second thing, and we're going, hey, this is good. This person signed it. They were the right person. We set up the process to do it. It's been digitally signed, and all signatures are valid. So that's really, really valuable in a lot of signature use cases, real estate, law, just everyday life. What becomes really cool about the SDK is like, I've got this signature here. I'm going to move it just a little bit, and the SDK immediately recognizes the document's been altered, which I think is really fascinating and really, really cool. And where the value of this goes, it's going, hey, these were signed, but it's been changed since it was signed, and it's invalidating the digital certificate, which is really cool. And so using Nutrient's Web SDK, you can do a couple things. You can bring your own certificate to play, and you can use us as the vehicle to apply it, certify that. We also have the ability to provide certificates through one of our DWS processor products, which is a hosted server product that we have that we'll talk a little bit at the end as we wrap up. So we can actually help you get set up with certificates as well, so you don't have to go into the market and procure them themselves. So great, 1 second. So we've made our way down quite a way. So viewing, forms, creation, all signatures, and then we're going to get into a little bit of more niche things that we see more applicable to certain industries, certain use cases, and things like that. I did want to recognize that we have kind of glanced over the image documents and the office file support. We have some other conversion tools that we can do as well. If we're looking at our server side solution, where you're adding basically a server component on that you self-host called Document Engine that communicates with our web interface, it opens up the ability to do a lot more with our technology. Essentially, the browser's limited, right? You have different factors such as Wi-Fi, what type of browser, are you using Internet Explorer still? You shouldn't. And then, the computer, the processing power, things like that, all those come into effect on kind of the performance side of what a web SDK can do client side. We use WebAssembly obviously to help streamline some of this stuff and really help some of that heavier processing go faster. But there's just some things that you do need a server to kind of process. And so what you'll see is if you're considering one of these tools that we have, and it's really where we get into some really exciting stuff, is like we're able to OCR documents, compressed documents, these are certain things, linearization as well. So there's a lot more in terms of like functionality that we can open up if you're using our server technology as well, which super easy to install. We've got a couple of different ways to do it. Obviously we have more language specific server technology, like our .NET SDK, previously GD Picture. We have a Java SDK, a Node.js SDK, but Document Engine is delivered primarily through a Docker container that you can deploy on Linux. And so it's super flexible. It's meant to scale. We have customers that have millions and millions of concurrent users. And so it plays really nice with like an elastic server structure, like Kubernetes or something like that. So we're happy to talk a little bit about that on a future date. But today we're going to stick with web, mainly because we only have 15 more minutes. So going to speed up a little bit on some of these things to kind of show high level what else you can accomplish with the web SDK. So document editor, this is a tool that I think a lot of people rely on Adobe for, to be honest. And that's simply, being able to rearrange pages, being able to rotate, really edit the actual document itself, not the actual pages. And so deleting, adding new pages, things like that, merging, you can do a lot here in terms of importing documents. So, again, instead of downloading, going to another application or trying to figure out some way how to combine two documents, this is an easy way to do it in your application without ever leaving We've also got some other cool stuff that the document editor can do in terms of like cropping. So if you need to crop certain things, you know, like I really just need to print out this logo. You know, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And so I'm gonna go ahead and crop the current page, and now I've got that logo, and I can print that out specifically instead of taking like a screenshot or something like that. So that's document editor. I'm gonna save that one for a little bit later. And then one thing we're seeing a lot of traction on recently, and what's really, really cool about it is our comments and replies feature. And so our comments and replies feature is really valuable when you have multiple people. I'm going to use this link annotation and jump over here. We have multiple people collaborating on the document, right? You've got PDFs are, you know, typically like static, you have one person, but like as the world's evolved, especially during the pandemic, you know, you're doing a lot more things digitally. You know, a lot of people leverage tools like Google Docs, where you have multiple stakeholders working on the same document. And so we were thinking, like, how do we bring this to PDFs? How do we, you know, again, modernize and really help shape how people are going to work with documents? And so the comments and replies feature basically gives you ability to have a sidebar conversation with multiple stakeholders. So like, I'm not sure what this means. Can you help? And so I can go ahead and add this annotation, and then, you know, it says anonymous here, but I can change, I can change the name. It's easy prompt to do with one of our APIs, but then like, you tell me, I don't know either. You can have these sidebar conversations with people. You can, you know, mention people if you needed to, if you need to be like @Paviter, like, what are you doing back there? You can mention people, but it's bringing some of these tools that I think you commonly find in a lot of other, I guess, solutions like Google Docs and the like, but you're bringing it inside your application, and you're doing it from an SDK perspective, which gives you a lot more flexibility there. So comments and replies has really been something we're seeing a lot of adoption on in terms of like, and we've got a lot of cool things around how you can collaborate on documents right now. And so when I say collaborate, there's a couple different ways. There's like the normal way of like, you know, we're just looking at, you know, comments and replies, but there's also what we've built, something called instant collaboration. And so like, if I had to really sum it up, it's very similar to what you think when you find like a Google Docs where you have multiple people collaborating in real time. You need those changes to be going back to the server quickly, so everyone's working on the latest document. And so we brought that to PDF. And so I've got two different instances. Excuse me, let me do some housekeeping. I've got two different instances on the tab up here of the Nutrient Web SDK. And basically it's being tagged from the URL. And so I can draw here, and then when I pull up the other instance, it's here. So again, if I move this here, that's being moved as well. And so this is really cool technology that we can use. And like, it's not limited to just the annotation type. There's different things as well. So like, you know, if I go highlighting, that's there. If I delete an annotation as well, that's going to be reflected on the other document. If I fill out forms, there's a lot there that you can leverage. If I added a pages, it would send essentially a notification that everyone needs to reload. So that's instant collaboration. It's a really cool tool, and that's where that comments and reply thing comes in really handy, because when you're having those real-time conversations, what you don't want is to have to be able to download the document and go there. But now I'm getting that information in real time. You could set up notifications and things like that. So really cool stuff there. So we've got two more things, and then I'm going to jump around to some of the core things we're working on right now and just released, and I think gaining traction. One of a really common use case is redaction. And so redaction you have to be a little bit careful about, and if you're looking for a redaction tool, because there's a lot of different ways to go about it. You know, we see that some vendors, you know, give you the ability to maybe hide the information, but you know what you're really looking for redaction, you're looking for to remove the information that's you can no longer find it. And then that's true redaction. So that once you redact it, that you cannot reverse it. And so we've built a couple different ways to do that. We have an area redaction that, you know, maybe we need to pull this image off of, because, you know, I was doing a webinar and we probably don't want to have people's faces on webinars. Or we can do a text selection redaction as well. So again, we'll use webinar as our reason why we're redacting this, but we can do this. The really cool thing about this is, you know, if I'm looking right now for certain words, if I open it up in another viewer, it's been removed and said it's irreversible. So redaction is a really cool thing. So kind of going back to something I mentioned earlier was that anything I'm doing from a UI perspective, so me using the mouse, interacting with the document, things like that, I can do it manually. So, you know, maybe you have someone who redacts documents every single day. They can do that, right? Open up the document, redact it, things like that. I think there's also a lot of value in what we do in terms of giving access to those APIs to programmatically do things. And so we have certain things called like smart redaction, where, you know, we're giving it prompts that we've helped it understand in terms of credit card numbers, phone numbers, and we're saying, hey, go into the document and go find these things, like tell me where they are. And so that when we load the document, we're able to go ahead and preemptively either check to see if we want to do that or if we want to do that. So like, I don't know, let's say I want to get rid of all credit card numbers within that. I can mark it for redaction. It finds it based on its understanding, and then I can apply it. So I can really speed these things up, like find email addresses. And so you can do this completely headlessly and never have a person interact with it with like our server side tools. Or you could have the web SDK find these things, you open up the document, it's already kind of tagged for you, and then you do it. So a lot of cool things there in terms of how do you do it. So we're doing great. So redaction, the last couple things we want to look at before we jump to the new products is, 1 second, need some water. Our comparison features. And so we have two types of comparison. We have a vector-based comparison. So vector would be like image-based comparison. So like what you're looking at now, 2 blueprints, right? Again, work heavily in the AEC industry, working with construction and engineering companies. And so like this was something they said would be really valuable. So what we do is we take 2 plans. And as you see in the top right corner, I'm picking 3 spots on the PDF, right? 3 spots, and we give you the grid. I might need to zoom out a little bit on this one, so we're going to zoom out. I'm going to pick 3 spots on this PDF. Need to zoom out a little bit more, okay? And then we're going to overlay the PDFs on top of each other, which now you're seeing a representation of what's different with the PDFs, which is the point, which is really, really cool to me, where like now we can see that on the second version of the document, the wall's been moved. It's a little bit off here, down here on the bottom as well, it's been moved. And so you can find these key differences between versioning and things like that, which I think is a really valuable thing in terms of that. So that is our document comparison. Something else that we released recently is actually our ability to also do it with text-based documents. So you're overlaying 2 text-based documents and being able to identify the differences there as well. So like if you have, you know, a red line process where you need to see the first version versus the second version, you could see those differences and work from there. So that's another type of comparison that we have. So we're getting about to the end, so we're going to rush through a couple more things. We take a look, and I've kind of left content editor as our last thing to look at the web SDK, because it helps us transition into kind of a couple other cool things that we've been doing on our side. So content editor is kind of in the same line as the form creator in terms of it's solving a very similar problem. We've created a document digitally at some point. You know, maybe we're finding a mistake and I don't have the source document, or I don't want to go back and change the source document, or maybe it was digitally born. And so like we don't have the source document. Content editor is going to give you the ability to come in and actually change the underlying text. So a lot of what I've demoed today would be an additional layer to the PDF. So for those of us who are old enough, when you used to have like the projector back in the, back in the classroom, when the teacher basically puts that lamination on top of it, writes on it, that's what we've been doing to the PDF. We've been adding another layer to the PDF. This gets down to actually changing the actual document itself. So, instead of Canon, I'm gonna get a Ricoh scanner. I ran out of room, so I need to do that. The dimensions are a little bit different, so I'm gonna go 19, but this gives you the ability to kind of actually manipulate the underlying text as well and add things. So maybe I just don't want this anymore. And so content editor is really, really cool to be able to interact with the PDF itself. So content editor is great for like these one-off edits and things like that. What we found is that people are interested in having like a full-blown, like what you see, what you get, like document authoring ability to like actually do word processing within their application. So here comes our document authoring SDK, which, allows you to ingest docx files, keep them as a docx file, and do more like traditional word processing that you'd use with, a Google Docs, Microsoft Word, things like that. And so we have much more of a flexible way, as you can see in the toolbar, of ways to interact with documents. And so now you're thinking about your custom web app. I've got a word processor now. I can actually go and convert it to a PDF and do things here. So like our idea is to really bridge this gap. We're like, we're not going to care what type of document you bring in. We're going to look at it as a rectangle that people are viewing on a screen. And that's going to give you the ability to kind of manipulate documents as you need. Whether you need to bring it into a docx format from PDF, have the ability to edit. Do you need to come from a docx format and put it into PDF and sign it? Now we're connecting the dots where like you can stay all in your application without using other tools, which is really valuable. What I think has been really cool to see, and Pab's had a heavy hand in this and really helpful with this, is like taking these type of scenarios and bringing them to other places where you work, not maybe a web application, but like in Salesforce. How often have you had to been like, that quote has the dates wrong, or I need to add this component, or I need to, change the signature date. Like being able to do this all within Salesforce rather than downloading it because it doesn't have a native word processor or PDF editor is important. Doing it in SharePoint as well, where you have to kick out to maybe Adobe or something like that. So doing it and, ServiceNow, Mendex applications, there's so many ways when you're working from an SDK point of view that we can put these things there. And that's really, really cool in our eyes. So, and then our last thing that we're gonna look at today, before we kind of wrap up and give some resources here, is our AI assistant. So, obviously AI is making a big impact on the way we work, and it was something that we certainly wanted to be ahead of. And so we've come into the market with this, and really, really proud of it, because I don't see a lot of other vendors working on it now. But essentially it's an AI assistant that, you can launch a side of your document. We're giving you plug in your LLM, and then you're able to ask it questions and interact with the document. What you're seeing is I've already asked it to programmatically redact certain things here. So, I'm picking up from a last demo with a customer, but, I could be like, what is this document about? So basically Avalon, which is basically an end user application similar to our showcase that we've built with the SDK, allows me to ask questions. And then from there, I can be like, I want you to annotate this, I want you to do this, but I'm able to interact with the document as well, and do things. So really, really cool stuff. Again, like we're trying to really give people the ability to kind of push how they want to interact with their documents. And then the last thing that I wanted to kind of also highlight is, today I've shown a lot of different functionality from an SDK perspective. So you're assuming that you're taking this binary, this pile of code, and you're sticking it into your application. You're owning that. You're owning that development process. You're owning the code, things like that. Just recently, we actually released a hosted version of all this. So think all that functionality, but removing the headache of having to worry about the infrastructure, the hosting of it. And so we have just launched this, and we're really, really excited about it. We talked about it on our last quarter, our quarterly product launch with our wonderful product marketing team of, now we're giving people even more flexibility of like, you want this technology. Do you want to bring this into your own environment, or is it something maybe we can take off your hands and then give you kind of an easy business model to work with? So that's going to wrap up the product portion. So I'm going to jump back into kind of the slides here to bring us home. And you've definitely heard me touch on a lot of this during the webinar today, and kind of why this technology is so valuable. You've heard me talk about speed. Us doing it rather than you having to build on it, and that correlates to different savings that you're doing from a development perspective. And then there's the security part of this. You're hosting this internally in your infrastructure by default. So like, you're in the control of your data and things like that. And we're constantly staying up to different market trends of, accessibility, and things like that. And we'd love to have you, whether you're here as an existing partner, or you're interested in joining with us. I've always looked at Nutrient as an extension of your team. So when you sign up for a subscription with us, you're adding 160 people basically to your organization, both for support, both for integration help, whether it's Pav helping you, maybe with a custom example. So we talked about a lot of the logos on here today and the different ways they use this as well. We mentioned Bayern Munich, Autodesk, obviously, from the ability in the AEC world. So there's a lot of different things here. And then lastly, now what? If you want to continue to have a conversation, there's a lot of different ways. Typically, what I like to do is I will put my my information in the Q&A session. So if you do want to have a direct conversation with me, you're welcome to reach out. Alternatively, you can also come to our website. We've got a lot of different resources there in terms of how you can get in touch with us. You can subscribe to our blog, because that's when we're definitely in keeping an eye on that. So you can see different things that we're releasing, like AI Assistant, the Database Viewer. You can use the demo page that I used today. We also have a free trial. So if there's anything that caught your eye today, you can spin it up in kind of a localized environment. If you want to talk pricing or subscription, or interested in more stuff, give us a shout at sales as well. We sell our technology as a subscription service that comes with support and updates. Obviously, we're happy to help ahead of time. Like, again, if you're signing up with Nutrient, you're getting 150, 160 people joining your team as well, and that's the really value prop. But that's all we have for today. I don't see any questions in the messages or the Q&A that we can't knock out. So again, thanks for stopping by today. We'll continue to do these. Please get in touch if you have any questions, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.